Welcome to the Heavy Spoilers Show. I'm your host Definition, aka your friendly neighbourhood spoiler man, and I have watched Avengers Endgame an insane amount of times. Whether it's the way it closes out the saga, or just the nice little callbacks in the movie, something keeps bringing me back. I'm currently in the middle of making a big watching order video for all of the Marvel properties, and over the last 8 months I've watched everything that falls under the umbrella. Whether it's Agent Carter, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., Cloak and Dagger, Daredevil, or the movies themselves, chances are, you name it, I've watched it. With all of this info stuffed in my head, I've noticed some crazy details in Avengers Endgame, and throughout this video I'm going to be breaking down some of the best things that most people have missed. There will be heavy spoilers here, so if you haven't had a chance to watch Avengers Endgame, and don't want to, who am I kidding, you've seen the movie, make sure you subscribe to the channel for videos like this every day. Now let's get into our breakdown of insane details you missed in Avengers Endgame. Okay, so one of the best things about Infinity War and Endgame as a whole is that the latter pays off so many minor things in the former that the Russo brothers should be applauded for their sheer amount of attention to detail. Both movies were filmed back to back, but even so there are still some tiny little self-referential things that not only show character development but also add to the world building. When talking to Doctor Strange, Tony Stark and Wong, Bruce Banner is surprised to learn that Ben & Jerry's have named an ice cream flavour after him. This gets a big follow-up in Endgame when we can see Hulk eating it during the planning stages of the time heist. I don't know why Ben & Jerry still haven't made Hulka burning fudge yet, but yeah, I want that more than anything right now. Also in Infinity War, Tony uses a nanotech shield to cover himself from an attack by Thanos. This severely depletes his supply of the microscopic machines and leads to him being almost killed by the Mad Titan. In order to make sure this doesn't happen again, in Endgame, Stark uses an energy shield as protection which won't drain on his armour. Clearly he's learned from his mistakes, and he's not the only one either. At the start of Infinity War, after Thanos manages to get his hands on 2 Infinity Stones, he removes his armour, believing he is now invincible. However, at the end of the movie, the character is almost killed by Thor, and thus when he makes his attack at the end of Endgame, the younger version of him realises that it's probably sensible to keep the armour on. Every time Thor attacks the villain in the film, he goes for the head. This was of course set up in Avengers Infinity War when, due to his need to gloat, he went for the chest rather than the killing blow. Because of this, Thanos was able to wipe out half of all life within the galaxy and then retreat to the garden. In Endgame, he's here to kill him properly this time, and from their first meeting all the way until the final battle, every time Thor clashes with the character, he aims directly for his head. During this fight, we watch the awesome moment in which Captain America lifts Mjolnir and gains the power of Thor. As Thanos cannot lift the item himself, he instead grabs Cap's wrist rather than the hammer itself. When fighting Thanos, Cap throws his shield and then the hammer at it, which knocks Thanos off balance and is a callback to when the two struck one another in Avengers. Cap's armor has scales on it, and you can actually see these under the upper layer of his outfit in Infinity War. These scales first made an appearance in Black Panther and could show that after dropping Bucky off in Wakanda, Shuri gave him some upgrades. Earlier in the film, the Hulk Buster grabs Thanos, and you can see that the left arm on the armor isn't painted. This is because it was detached during the final battle in the prior movie. Thanos also breaks Cap's shield, similar to the way that it was destroyed in Tony Stark's vision all the way back in Age of Ultron. Infinity War was all about making sacrifices in order to win. Doctor Strange saved Tony in exchange for handing over the Time Stone, and there were several more examples of this in the film. I know this was part of his grand plan, but still it shows that they put the few before the many. Cap famously said that they don't trade lives when Vision offered up his life in order to destroy the Mind Stone, and this showed that they wouldn't make the hard play. Thus, Thanos was able to collect all of the Infinity Stones and win. This is because he was willing to sacrifice Gamora. In contrast, the Avengers win in Endgame because they do make sacrifices, including the death of Black Widow and of course Tony Stark. Thematically it's amazing and really pays off what was set up in the prior film. There are also hints in Infinity War that Gamora wasn't the first person to be sacrificed for the Soul Stone. As she lays there dead at the bottom of the ravine, we can see a pool of blood beside her. Could this be Natasha's from 2014? Well, we do know that she did trade her life for the stone, and then Cap returned it, so therefore this moment would be permanent and it wouldn't cause a branched timeline. When Natasha tells Steve that she has to work on fixing everything, the soundtrack is also a variation on the Soul Stone sacrifice music which foreshadows her death later. When Steve sets out on his mission to return the stones, he says to Bucky, "Don't do anything stupid until I get back." Bucky replies, "How can I? You're taking all the stupid with you." This is actually a callback to Captain America the First Avenger, in which the conversation was reversed, with Steve delivering the opposite dialogue to Bucky before he went off to fight in World War II. Before leaving his mission, Cap looks in the direction of where his old version would later be sat and says, "I'll be back." At the end of the film, Steve and Peggy finally get that dance, and it's the same song from when Steve found Fury in his apartment in Winter Soldier. The song is called "It's Been a Long, Long Time," which is of course a reference to the journey that Steve has been on to finally get to his long lost love. When taking the Pym particles from Hank, he takes 4 in total. This is 2 for him and Stark to return to the present, and 1 for him to go to the past, and another to eventually return back to this timeline. After returning from the past on his own little journey, Hawkeye seems pretty beat. Scott grabs some orange slices, which is a nice little callback to Civil War, in which he asked if anyone had any to help ease his pain. Natasha makes a peanut butter jelly sandwich, which Scott shows up and eats. She cuts it diagonally, which is a callback to Nick Fury telling Carol that he can't eat toast that's been cut in the same way. Could she be in a habit of doing this to stop Nick from stealing her lunch at work? Well, we'd like to think so. That's not the only neat little Easter egg that ties into other movies in the MCU. In Thor Ragnarok, before Odin dies, he says to Thor and his brother, "Remember this place? Home." This scene takes place in Norway and is actually the location that New Asgard would come to be in Endgame. But it's not the only time the area makes a big appearance. Tonsberg has been a crucial location in the MCU right from the beginning. This is the location where the Asgardians fought centuries ago, and it's also where the Tesseract was hidden and then taken by Red Skull. It is of course where Odin dies, and where New Asgard comes to be. So yeah, lots of things are tied to this exact spot. During Ragnarok, a line is also set up and paid off in Endgame. Loki tells Thor that he cannot see into the future as he's not a witch. In Endgame, Frigga can tell that Thor is from the future because, as she says, she was raised by witches. It's not the only touching exchange between parent and child that has major callbacks to the MCU either, and in Endgame when Howard asks Tony about his father, Stark Jr. says he did his best. This is a nod to the barf demonstration in Civil War, in which Tony says that he wishes he could have told his father, "I love you Dad, and I know you did the best you could." I'm not crying, you're crying. During this scene, Jarvis from Agent Carter pops up as well. I know you've probably heard that 100 times, but yeah, I just wanted to add it in. There's tons of callbacks too, and loads of nice little Easter eggs in the scene in which Tony and Scott go to Stark Tower in 2012. Tony's armor retracts from the feet first to silence his landing and make it so they aren't heard entering the room. Thor says that they're going for lunch, which is a reference to the shawarma scene from the post-credit scene of Avengers. Tony also flicks Ant-Man with insane accuracy because he'd been practicing playing paper football with Nebula for weeks. When exiting the building, Tony replays a similar move to which he did in the first Avengers movie, however his suit quickly engages over him instead of when he almost hits the pavement, which shows how far his technology has come since 2012. Speaking of technology, the quantum suits themselves also show the melding of a lot of tech in the MCU. They use Pym tech in order to shrink, the nanotech is from Iron Man and Wakanda's nanomachines, and the visor is from the Guardians and Ratchet. Sorry, I mean Rocket. Speaking of Ratchet, Tony calls him this in the film, and it's a reference to the furry Sony character who is also great with machines. The Russos love casting people they know, and Anthony Russo's daughter plays Hawkeyes in the film. This is who we see training in the beginning, and you may notice sounds of birds and wildlife in the background. After the snap is carried out, these disappear, showing that a lot of animals were also killed when Thanos made the devastating move. The child we see in Captain America the Winter Soldier also returns to take a picture with Smart Hulk at the diner. Two community actors pop up, including Yvette Nicole Brown, who gets in a lift with Steve and Tony, and also Ken Jeong, who is a guard at the lockup. Jeong is reading a book called Terminal Breach, which is about a president who decides to destroy countless nuclear weapons at the cost of millions of lives. This of course is ties to Thanos' plan in which he killed trillions in order to save the galaxy. Spider-Man told Tony in Civil War that he'd never get a chance to play football due to his powers, but we see him get the opportunity in the final battle in which the character literally runs the gauntlet. In Spider-Man Homecoming, there's a hilarious scene in which Peter thought Tony was going for a hug, and Tony says, "We're not there yet, but in Endgame, Tony and Peter hug, which shows how far their friendship has come. Tony Stark is able to solve the time travel model after seeing a picture of him and Peter holding an inverted diploma. This inspires him to invert the Mobius strip, which as we know is crucial in allowing the group to go back. You can also see Peter's traditional Spider-Man costume under the suit when it becomes damaged. This is because he had it on under the Iron Spider armor all the way back in Infinity War. As he died on Titan and then came straight to the final battle after being resurrected, he wouldn't have had time to change. When War Machine is stuck in Avengers HQ, he gets out the suit by saying "Canopy, canopy, canopy." This is code for eject, eject, eject in the Air Force. A pilot says this to their backseater so that they can leave first. You can also see the Iron Patriot Mark II armor in the background of the scene, which makes an appearance later on. The Wasp leaves a tiny small portal, and we also see Spider-Man swinging on Ant-Man in order to move forward. The end of the film culminates with Tony carrying out the snap and killing Thanos and his forces. Not only can you hear Tony's nanomachines taking the stones off Thanos' gauntlet and putting them into his suit, but there's also a couple of neat little callbacks to the prior film. The first time we hear Thanos talk in Infinity War, he says he knows what it's like to lose and how it turns the legs to jelly. When dying, the first thing he does is sit down. Why this scene is also perfect is because the camera movement mimics his victory at the end of Avengers Infinity War. It pans across exactly the same way and shows the victory and defeat in a similar light. At Tony's funeral, everyone stands still except for Mantis, who sways in a rocking motion. This was put in place because it's typical of mantids to sway when stood still. Morgan tells Happy that she wants some cheeseburgers, and this is a reference to the first Iron Man in which Tony made Happy get him some after returning home from being held hostage. The credits end with the clanging noise of Iron Man building his suit in the first film, and this brings everything full circle. All 22 films, which is also paid lip service to by Stark in the beginning of Endgame, who says they've been adrift for 21 days, no 22. And that's our entire list. I had a blast making this video and hope you had fun watching it. Obviously I'd love to hear your thoughts on the tidbits, so comment below and let me know. Make sure you subscribe to the channel for videos like this every day, and if you want something else to watch, then make sure you check out our breakdown of every time that Pennywise was hidden in the background of a scene in It Chapter 1 and 2. That's going to be linked at the end, and every month on the 15th we give away free Blu-rays, and all you have to do to be in with a chance of winning Dr. Sleep is leave a comment and subscribe with notifications on. If you want to support the channel and get to see content early, then please consider clicking the join button. You can also come chat to us on our Discord link below or at DefinitionYT on Twitter. Thanks for sticking to the end. I've been Definition, you've been the best, and I'll see you next time. Take care, peace.